there is another aspect that I need to discuss today. This one was not worked out in last century. I'm doing it on my own first time, but it is something that has become rather accumulating and not resolved and needed to be handled properly. And that is the political aspect, political organization itself, in terms of what I am detecting today as understanding of how we understand state, nation, how we understand population, how we understand build up of a nation. I recognize here history, recognize historically build up population, recognize, as you all know by now, the genetic houses and the importance of genetics, and recognize the importance that we discuss how we are going to understand nation and how we are going to manage a nation. It become also question of understanding other nations and building international relationships. All that today is very obsolete, very messed up, and confused. I also pulled out recognizing importance of identity, individualism, and ultimately leadership as a matter of build up standards rather than opportunism, as when we speak political leadership or building societies, opportunism is not exactly a word that would belong in category of subjects as are political philosophy, political arguing, conceptual thinking, political scientific approaches, even political science. Nothing here is about opportunism, or certainly not when we are talking about pure ideology that deal like in the science, released from any kind of material criteria, but purely focused on fabric matter, substance matter, which is today, I'm talking humanity, I'm talking realm. It's beyond economy, profit making, opportunism, blah, blah, blah. It is pure science. That is where I brought politics today. And I have argued there was that missing top of the pyramid which Masonries totally surrendered to religion or have been manipulated by religion to play the monkeys on the field, most probably, and promote such stupid idea that certainly was working for religions, for sure, and become played down as a puppets to religion power centers, I'm going to say, which took on themselves the right to deal with anything that is on the level of thinking beyond the world of economic survival platforms. And humans have been developed on the level of some kind of zombies that are there to discuss only their physical survival, and everything that was much more higher thinking was like the house of God, and then it was in hands of just few people to think about these matters, and we ended up to be step away from living in the world where one good percentage of population feel as being hunted by the other population that are being given status of hunters and basically given stimulus to play hunters. And that someone, this invisible top, that invisible top, split the population to the one that are going to run like a Negroes in the forest and the one that's going to shoot at them while they're running like a Negroes in the forest. And entire planet has become split exactly on these two fields. On the other side, I have recognized here on this planet humanity. I have recognized cultural and political differences. I have recognized differences in development. I have recognized everything that should be recognized as a matter of obvious. But also I have recognized what human is supposed to be and what human civilization is supposed to be and what humanity is supposed to be. and how we can afford to measure human and how we cannot afford to measure human. Because we are here in the story of humanity, not in the story of hunted and hunters. But as much as people continue to use the horizontal mindset and then they replace it with vertical, and vertical locked somewhere in the cathedrals, cathedral. That is, should I say, prison for the intelligent one. I mean, no one wins here. I can't even think that cathedrals are responsible for this unfortunate cut out of the head of humanity. I think that someone decided to split human to head and body so they can control both. It was to split everything that possibly can be split so it can be controlled in better terms. They split the genders, they split the territories, they split the cultures, they split the genetics, the families. Now they're splitting the families as well. They split as much as they can be split so they can rule it. The rule here, split and rule. Someone is literally employing it. And they continue to think as predators. And there is no different situation than in economy when you talk about few billionaires or millionaires and billionaires on top of the, or billionaires on top of the hierarchy. Here in political stage you have few predators on top of the humanity. Predators that continue to think as predators, and then we are talking humanity. At this stage we have to agree. Humanity cannot be understood anymore as a predator. Neither the standard human can be set on the level of human predator. Maybe just a century ago, it was certainly a popular subject among the prevailing aristocracy of the West Side. And they were certainly proud of being predators. Today, no one can buy a ticket for nowhere with such description. Today, that would be embarrassing. They figured out in last century it is about smiling nice. Now it is about speaking nice and trying to play meaningfulness without having a subject, which is rather tragic event. You introduce your intelligent skill of intelligent conversation, but you don't have the subject matter. Because you're still in the shoes of predatory. And you can't get out of these shoes, because if you get out of there, you're going to lose everything. And that is the problem of these people. The amount of what they have to lose is what sets him in the past, from where they cannot get into the present. But no, we are not going to sign humanity on predatory anymore, which means that category of population is going to be marked as obsolete and crossed like that. Obsolete. Full package of obsoleteness. And it will need to be dealt with in the way how socialism needed to deal with them in the last century. I'm not going to say exactly in the same way, but certainly it will be something done from the vertical point rather than from the horizontal approaches. And that is breakthrough event. I wanted to point out therefore how ridiculous it is now that we continue to think of developed West and underdeveloped East, because never ever that was the correct answer. And it is even less today. First of all, of course, it's a question how we measure development, and to the extent that we today are recognizing two aspects of development, one material and the other, the history and historic heritage and the cultural identity and the genetic configuration and everything that waits in the eons of previous times, you will notice that on these subjects, East weighs much more. So the balance here still exists very much when it is in question, when we would come to talk about what is prevailing today. And that will need to be noticed. We cannot talk anymore about developed West, because today we have raised a bar, well, I don't like the expression for sure, raised the bar of what is going to be the standard of development. And as you can see now, we are enclosing the genetics, the historic heritage, previous development, the comprehensiveness of someone's capacity to think, the meaningfulness of someone's historic living and existence, what they have been doing in previous times, and what is their mental configuration. Now that is much more complex on the East side. And as much as you have solid development of the previous centuries to offset that with the rich economic development of the previous few centuries, last especially happening on the West, there is not enough of a substance. We have discussed all of this 15 years that you can pull from the Western territories that can actually offset the Eastern. However, today when bringing this kind of vertical approach in dealing with a horizontal ground, one is going to find everything on one table. Both of sides will need to be criticized for what they will need to be criticized according to what's going to be noticed here. What's going to be noticed is, first and foremost, I'm going to notice that what appear very often as a criminal, recognizing as a criminal behavior, therefore, of the Eastern caste, of this previous behavior, that although does have elements of intelligent sparks, predominantly is a hazardous historic marching on the West, would bring still remains of such kind of psychology of going on the West as some kind of money ball, and harassing everything on the way as you go, and having that kind of disastrous spirit of basically crunching everything under your feet and destroying everything that is not in your circles of interest zones. And in such a scenario, West is more like a stage, while Western population very often victim to such disastrous marching of Eastern empires on the West side. And very often today, when we talk about West, we're talking about this kind of headquarters that are basically Eastern imperial movement on the West. And that is what we actually call West. So, it is West wing of the empire, therefore, rather. And accordingly will need to be today dealt with as such. Now, if I declare, therefore, House of Earth again, and then I recognize there is a West wing and there is East wing, we are not talking about geography, we are talking about empire. So it is time, therefore, that we recognize when we speak in politics that we still have two phenomena, two different protocols that we need to keep on mind. That is, one protocol is geographic polarization on east, south, west, south, and north, and imperial protocol when we are going to talk about west, east, south, and north. Imperial protocol. These are different references, different protocols. Same reference, but different protocol. And from now on, we will need to clarify either we are using geographic reference or we are using imperial reference. Most of the time, I found as important that I bring my hands over controlling the imperial protocol, because I felt that there is something that will need to be actually restructured, will need to be handled, will need to be dealt with. Well, where it is in question geography, there is not much you can deal with, but rather to recognize constitution, people living on the land, which I have immediately recognized, brought that forward, rights to people to be recognized on their territories, and be given chances to develop on first account, recognized the currency very much associated to genetic construct of population now there, have given plenty to geographical locations. But in the same time would come certain level of expectations that if one would like to also as a geography reach to upper references of ultimate world class development, that we need to enclose a bit more of attributes than just geography and living on the land. And so you can't have it all here, obviously. Now, in order that one is going to validate, however, that imperial presence, imperial contribution, it needed to be validated. It needed to be filtered. And that is what I'm doing as we speak. So I turn on television and people are sitting on the chairs as it is falling from them on them from the sky as a blessing from the God. Is not exactly how this is going to work. If I'm going to call empire on reform, I'm calling empire on reform. That means I have not given you sets in some kind of shareholding rooms, but in amphitheater. And even when looks that you are in shareholding room, you will need to be reminded it is not about shareholding anymore. You are having a chair in amphitheater because we are going to restructure the entire concept of imperial historic heritage. I wanted to point out, much more than speaking about Olymp, but turned to be equally something that really needed to be rounded up. I wanted to talk more about the world and how the world became today that place that you can notice actually become one place that you need to simply synchronize. And to understand that it weighs in its own issues, and each of the parts of the world have their weighted issues and they need to be assessed. To speak about confronting each other while you all have weighting issues is ludicrous, it is counterproductive, and it is wrong. I'm going to say it is outlaw. It is not permissible. It is not permissible to confront that much with others while actually you're supposed to sit on your side of the story and deal with your issue and how they wait on you. Because they wait on you. They wait on you in America. Equally as issues of Russians wait on Russians, and issues of China wait on China, and issues of Africa wait on Africa, and issues of South America wait on South America. These are beautiful territories. Entire Earth is beautiful. The point is that I'm going to replace today imperial heritage with planetary protocol, which means that I'm giving much more presence to territories which would have been held as occupied territories. I would give them returning to their authentic identity, which is obviously questionable now. What is authentic identity? We talk humanity here as a protocol that has been built in some kind of centralized approach, as a planetary approach. So I'm bringing here very much Olymp as a matter of philosophical arguing as well, which is not exactly accepted in United Nations, and that is why I feel that I need to bring different approach altogether how we are going to manage the planet, where we are going to talk about these issues, while in the same time stamping history on territories where it will need to be stamped because of the genetics that is already there, how it is, and that is more like we are going to recapitulate on what has been accomplished so far, and then as we are going to stamp each of the developments on all of the rest of the territories accordingly. You will pay attention to details. Each of the territories subsequently will be stamped for different kind of reasons. Now you go in Austria, but they're being stamped rather by their capacity to spend money rather than to play political leadership of some kind of grander proportions. It has not happened today in Austria, again, a monarchy. It has happened the shine of empire, but not the emperor. And as they continue to enjoy the consuming the empire, someone still need to deal with the issues on daily basis, and I am not Austrian. But I am dealing with daily issues, which means I am the empress today. And as far as I am not Austrian empress, Austria is not empire. My verdict for today, Austria is consumer protocol driven. Austria has become tourism center and consumer driven protocol. And as much as we are not going to destroy Austria in the way how someone destroys Syria, for example, they should be grateful for that kind of goodwill and enjoy their history from point of consumer, as that is what they are today. If you want to talk about the population, that's not historic heritage. That's nation and flag of a nation, and how you manage your nation today. We are in therefore different subject altogether. And that is, you're not going to be validated, of course, by museum criteria, but what kind of political analysis you're going to include today. And I have found you acting as little kids. Also, I can notice by your face expressions while talking to visiting Donald Trump, you were not talking about Ukraine, you were talking about this event as well. I found you quite stuffed, should I say. Troubled a bit. And that is because you have been living for a longer period of time convincing that history is how you're going to write it in your books rather than how it is. It was very natural just a couple of decades ago, my father to look like a second-hand event versus his Croatian colleagues, let aside, and the Germans looked like gods sliding from the sky. And my father looked like smallest among them. They looked like gods, and he looked like a hat maker. I can imagine what is the stress upon realization that it is actually other way around. I mean, if you need some kind of medicine to help your psychological traumatic state in which you are today, we can work that as well. We can work it out. And I can't see any other problem, to be honest. You have just psychological traumatic stage. You're getting through that phase of your life, which is one of the symptoms of awakening in a new time. That's the only problem I can notice in Europe for now. So I don't know if Donald Trump can help something with that state, rather than wasting bombs and military weapons. I think the problems are of psychological nature, rather than physical. You're being over defensive, and you have problem to notice the defense is already on, and it is not in the shape of a weapon. First of all, is some kind are in question some kind of imperial level of arguing, which has nothing to do with your your political mindfulness, and you're being played as a political puppets out there, bringing your nations with you, and entire Europe with you, becoming today some kind of political puppetry to some kind of obsolete imperial arguing.